The evening was buzzing with excitement. The concert hall glowed with soft lights and people were dressed in their best clothes, ready for a night of music. The stage stood proudly in the center, with a polished grand piano gleaming under the spotlight. Every seat was filled, and the air carried a mix of anticipation and chatter. People whispered about how lucky they were to hear one of the greatest pianists of their time. When the famous pianist walked onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. He bowed with a charming smile, the kind of smile that showed he knew how to win over a crowd. He was not only a master of music but also known for his humor. He loved teasing his audience, making them laugh and then leaving them spellbound with his performances. Tonight was no different. He sat at the piano and let his fingers dance over the keys. The first notes floated into the hall like magic. The audience leaned forward, caught in the spell. Each piece was played with such passion and skill that people could hardly breathe. The room was filled with harmony, silence broken only by the music itself. But this pianist was never one to just play. He liked to make his shows unpredictable. Halfway through the evening, after finishing a grand piece, he turned to the audience with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. He scanned the rows as if searching for something, or someone. Then, with sudden boldness, he pointed to a woman sitting quietly among the crowd. She looked around, startled, unsure if he was truly pointing at her. But the spotlight swung in her direction, and now there was no doubt. The audience chuckled, whispering to each other, wondering what was going on. The pianist, in a playful tone, invited her to come up on stage. He made it sound like a joke, as if he just wanted to test her courage. The woman froze for a moment. She was not dressed like someone who expected to be on stage. She wore a simple outfit, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes widened in surprise, and her hands fidgeted nervously. People around her began clapping, encouraging her to stand. Some laughed, expecting only a brief moment of awkwardness for fun. Slowly, she rose from her seat. Her movements were shy, almost hesitant. She walked down the aisle toward the stage, each step echoing in the silent hall. Her cheeks flushed as hundreds of eyes followed her. The famous pianist stretched out his hand, guiding her up the steps. The crowd chuckled again, certain that this was only a humorous break before the next serious performance. She sat down on the piano bench, looking small next to the large instrument. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Trembling slightly, the pianist leaned toward her and whispered something. His words weren't heard by the crowd, but his smile suggested he was still treating it as a joke. He stepped back, folding his arms, ready to watch. The audience expected nothing. Maybe a few random notes, maybe a funny attempt. Nobody believed she could actually play. After all, she was just an ordinary woman pulled from the crowd. For a moment, she did nothing. The hall was heavy with silence. Some people shifted in their seats. Others smirked. The pianist raised his eyebrows as if to remind her she could press the keys any time. Then, quietly, her hands touched the piano. The first note came, soft and uncertain. But then another followed, smoother this time. The audience leaned closer, their smiles fading as curiosity grew. The pianist tilted his head, surprised. Her fingers began to move with more confidence. The melody took shape, gentle, yet strong. It was not random. It was precise, thoughtful, and deeply emotional. The music seemed to rise out of her as naturally as breathing. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, eyes closed, lost in the sound. The crowd fell silent, as if the world itself had paused. The pianist stood completely still, the playful grin gone from his face. He had expected a clumsy effort, maybe a laugh. Instead, what he heard shook him. This was no beginner's hand. This was the touch of someone who carried music deep within. People in the audience exchanged stunned looks. Some whispered in disbelief. Others simply stared. Their laughter had turned to awe. The ordinary woman had transformed before their eyes into something extraordinary. Her notes grew bolder, her tempo quicker. The music filled every corner of the hall, washing over the crowd with warmth and intensity. Nobody moved, nobody coughed. Even the air seemed to stand still. The woman's simple presence now held hundreds of people captive, By the time she finished, the silence was almost unbearable. Her final chord hung in the air, then slowly faded. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. People leapt to their feet, clapping wildly, cheering, whistling. It was as if the walls themselves shook. From the sound, the famous pianist stood closest, clapping louder than anyone. His face showed both shock and admiration. His joke had turned into a revelation. He bowed his head to her, recognizing the greatness that had just been revealed. The woman opened her eyes, her cheeks flushed. She looked almost embarrassed at the standing ovation. Yet in that moment she was no longer ordinary. She was unforgettable. The thunderous applause still echoed in the hall. The woman sat frozen at the piano, unsure of how to respond. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled. She had not expected to play, let alone stun a full audience. Yet here she was, standing in the center of attention. The famous pianist walked toward her, his smile no longer playful, but filled with respect. He gently took her hand and raised it for the audience to see. The crowd cheered louder, standing on their feet. Some clapped until their palms turned red, others whistled and shouted in amazement. What began as a light-hearted joke had turned into one of the most unforgettable moments in the hall's history. The woman, however, lowered her gaze. She wasn't used to so many eyes on her. She looked almost shy, as though she wanted to slip back into the crowd. But the pianist whispered something encouraging to her, and she nodded faintly. Her cheeks were warm with embarrassment, but inside, something stirred, something she had long hidden. When the applause finally slowed, the pianist addressed the crowd. His voice carried humor, but also a touch of humility. He admitted that he had only meant to lighten the mood by calling her up, never expecting such a performance. He praised her openly, saying she had given them all a gift no one saw coming. The audience roared in agreement. The woman stood from the bench, still unsure what to do. The pianist escorted her back to her seat. The audience clapped again as she walked down the aisle. People turned their heads to watch her. Some whispered to each other, "Who is she? And how can she play like that?" The air buzzed with curiosity. When she sat back down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could hear murmurs all around her. Strangers leaned toward one another, trading guesses about her background. Some thought she must be a hidden professional. Others insisted she had to be related to the pianist. She remained silent, her heart racing. She had no desire to explain herself. Not yet. On stage, the pianist seemed to pause for a long moment. He looked at his piano with new eyes, perhaps realizing that the evening had taken a turn he hadn't planned. Finally, he cleared his throat and played another piece. But the energy in the hall had shifted. People were listening differently now. Their minds kept going back to the woman, replaying her melody in their heads. During intermission, the hall buzzed with chatter. Groups gathered near the lobby, coffee cups in hand. Everyone talked about the same thing, the woman who had stolen the show. Some described her as ordinary, others insisted she had the grace of a professional. One man even claimed he had seen her before in a small community recital years ago, though nobody could confirm it. The woman stayed in her seat, hoping not to draw attention, but it was impossible. A few people approached her, smiling kindly. They congratulated her, asked where she learned to play, and begged to know if she had training. She answered softly, her words brief, always redirecting the focus away from herself. It was clear she was uncomfortable with the spotlight, yet, deep inside, she couldn't deny the joy she had felt while playing. For the first time in years, she had touched the keys in front of an audience, and instead of fear, she had found freedom. Her mind drifted back to her childhood, when she would sit for hours practicing, dreaming of becoming a musician. Life had taken her on another path, one filled with responsibilities and quiet sacrifices, but the music had never left her. Meanwhile, backstage, the famous pianist spoke with members of his team. His usual charm was replaced with genuine amazement. He asked his staff if anyone knew the woman, but no one did. Curiosity burned in his eyes. He had played with world-class musicians, yet something about her performance lingered in his mind. It wasn't just skill, it was emotion, it was honesty. He knew she had something rare. When the second half of the concert began, the audience still seemed distracted. The pianist performed flawlessly. But whispers continued. People leaned in, their thoughts circling back to the mysterious woman. The pianist noticed it too. Every time he struck a chord, he felt her presence in the room, as if she had left an invisible mark on the stage. At the end of the night, as the crowd filed out of the hall, the woman tried to blend into the stream of people. She hoped to leave unnoticed. But once again she found herself stopped. A small group of admirers surrounded her, asking if she taught piano, if she would play again, if she had recordings. She shook her head politely, offering little more than a humble smile. The famous pianist, still on stage signing programs, looked up and noticed her slipping out of the hall. He paused mid-signature, watching her disappear into the night. Something about the way she carried herself, quiet yet powerful, stayed with him. He made a silent promise to himself. He needed to find out more about her. As she walked into the cool night air, the woman breathed deeply. The stars above seemed brighter. The city lights shimmered. Around her, she wrapped her coat tighter and smiled faintly. Tonight, she had stepped out of her ordinary life, even if only for a few minutes. For once, she wasn't invisible. For once, her music had been heard. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know that her life had already started. To change, the whispers in the hall would follow her. The pianist's curiosity would grow, and soon her hidden talent would no longer remain a secret. The next morning, the woman woke with the sound of music still in her ears. It was as if the piano keys from last night had followed her into her dreams. She sat up slowly, the sunlight pouring through the thin curtains. For a moment she wondered if it had all been a dream, but the memory of the crowd's applause rushed back, strong and real. Her small apartment was quiet, just the ticking of the old clock on the wall. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, replaying every moment from the concert. The way the pianist had smiled at her with respect, the shock on people's faces, the silence that fell before the clapping exploded. It all felt unreal. She touched her hands, still remembering how the keys had felt, smooth and familiar. She had spent so many years away from the stage. Life had pulled her into other duties, work, family, the endless rhythm of ordinary days. Music had become a private part of her life, something she only allowed herself in quiet moments. But last night had broken that wall. It had reminded her that music was not meant to be hidden. It was meant to be shared. Across the city, the famous pianist also sat at his breakfast table, a cup of coffee untouched beside him. He stared at the morning paper but barely read a word. His mind replayed the unexpected performance again and again. He thought of the way her fingers had moved with certainty, of the emotion in her melody. It was rare for him to be surprised on stage, rarer still to feel humbled, yet one ordinary woman had done both in a single night. Later that day, calls began flooding the concert hall office. People wanted to know who the woman was. Some insisted she must have been planted, part of the act. Others argued she was clearly a hidden professional. The staff had no answers. They hadn't known about her any more than the crowd had. The story spread quickly, whispered in cafes, posted on social pages, retold by everyone who had been there. Meanwhile, the woman tried to carry on with her day as if nothing had changed. She went to work, blending in as she always did. No one at her job knew what had happened the night before. To them, she was the same quiet figure at her desk, answering calls, filling forms, doing her tasks without fuss. But inside, she felt different. She carried a spark that had been missing for years. During her lunch break, she passed by a music shop. The window displayed a row of shiny instruments, guitars, violins, and a small upright piano. She stopped and stared, her reflection mixing with the keys behind the glass. A memory tugged at her. Her younger self sitting at a piano with dreams so big she thought they would last forever. She smiled sadly, then walked on, back at the hall. The famous pianist was restless. He spoke to his manager, asking if anyone had written down her name. No one had. She had vanished into the night like a ghost. He frowned, leaning back in his chair. He wasn't used to mysteries like this. He wanted to know who she was, not only out of curiosity but because he felt something important had happened. He felt as though fate had put her in his path. That evening, as she returned home, the woman found herself pausing outside her own door. She thought about the piano inside, an old upright she had kept for years. Its paint was chipped and some keys stuck, but it was still her treasure. She unlocked the door and went straight to it. She sat down, placed her fingers on the worn keys, and began to play. The notes filled the small apartment, spilling into the quiet hallway. She closed her eyes, and once again she was back in the hall. She could almost hear the crowd, almost see the surprised face of the pianist. The music grew louder, faster, her fingers flying. She didn't care if her neighbors heard. For once she felt alive. Across town, the pianist prepared for another performance, but his mind wandered. He thought of her again and again. He wondered if she was playing right now, somewhere in the city. He told himself he needed to find her, not to expose her or pressure her, but because he believed she had a story worth telling. The night crept in. Lights flickered across the city. The woman leaned against her piano, tired but happy. For years she had buried her love for music, but now it had come rushing back. She whispered softly to herself, promising she would not let it slip away again. She did not know that the world outside was already searching for her. She did not know that her quiet life was about to become louder, brighter, and far more complicated. The famous pianist had begun asking questions. The audience had begun telling her story, and soon she would have to decide whether to step forward or stay hidden. The city was still buzzing with the memory of that unforgettable night. People who had attended the concert told the story again and again. Some described it with wide eyes and dramatic gestures. Others leaned forward in excitement, lowering their voices as if sharing a secret. The tale spread beyond the hall, reaching ears of people who had not even been there. Newspapers picked it up. A few small articles appeared describing the incident as a magical moment when an unknown woman stunned a famous pianist. The stories did not mention her name, because nobody knew it. But they spoke of her modest appearance, her calm presence, and above all, her breathtaking skill. The mystery only made people more curious. The famous pianist could not let it go. Every night when he sat at his piano, his thoughts wandered back to her. He had seen many talented players in his life, but there was something about her music that had struck deeper. It was not only about skill, it was about truth. It was about heart. He wanted to find her, not for publicity, but because he believed she carried a gift that deserved to be shared with the world. He began asking around. At first, he spoke to the staff at the hall, but they had no records of her. She had not given her name. She had simply walked out into the night. He turned to his fans, mentioning the moment during interviews, hoping someone might recognize her. His words only made the story grow. Soon, it was not just a mystery in one city, but a story people across the country wanted to solve. Meanwhile, the woman lived her life quietly, trying to ignore the whispers around her. She heard the talk in cafes, saw a few headlines, even overheard co-workers gossiping about the mysterious woman who had stolen the stage. She kept her head down, pretending not to care, but inside her heart pounded. She knew they were talking about her. She feared someone might discover her secret. She had spent years avoiding attention. Music had always been her private escape, not something she used for recognition. She had once dreamed of being on stage, but life had pulled her away. Now, after one unexpected night, the world seemed to be calling her back. She wasn't sure she was ready. One evening, as she returned from work, she found a small group of people waiting outside her building. They held newspapers and spoke excitedly. One of them approached her and asked directly if she was the woman from the concert. Her breath caught. She shook her head quickly and hurried inside. Her hands trembled as she closed the door behind her. She sat in silence for a long time. Her piano stood in the corner, quiet and patient. She touched the keys but could not play. Fear and doubt filled her. She worried that the attention would grow until she had no choice but to face it. Across town, the famous pianist met with a journalist. He spoke with unusual seriousness. He explained that he wanted to find her, not for entertainment, but because He believed she had something rare. The journalist listened carefully and agreed to help. Within days, stories spread even wider, asking readers to come forward if they knew the mysterious pianist from the audience. The woman felt the world closing in. Everywhere she turned, she saw hints of her story. A picture of the concert hall appeared on a magazine cover. Headlines in bold letters asked, "Who was she?" She could not escape it, but alongside her fear, another feeling began to grow. A small spark of pride. She remembered the sound of the crowd cheering, the warmth of their applause. She remembered the way she felt alive at the piano, as if every hidden part of her had been given a voice. For years she had silenced that voice, but now it wanted to be heard again. One night, she sat at her old piano and played softly. Her hands moved over the keys with ease. The music carried her back to the stage, back to the moment when the world had listened. Her heart swelled with both fear and longing. She realized that music was calling her once more. The famous pianist, meanwhile, grew impatient. He organized a charity concert and hinted that if the mysterious woman attended, he would welcome her to the stage again. It was both an invitation and a challenge. The news spread quickly. The city buzzed with rumors. Would she appear? Would she remain a mystery forever? The woman heard about it from a neighbor who knocked on her door with excitement. Her neighbor insisted she had to go, that it was fate. She smiled weakly and thanked them, but closed the door with a heavy sigh. She stood in her small apartment, torn between two worlds. One world offered safety and anonymity. The other offered risk, but also the chance to share her music again. As the days passed, the pressure built. The concert drew closer. Her heart wrestled with doubt, but deep down she knew one thing. She could not ignore the call of the piano forever. The night of the charity concert arrived. The city's biggest hall was lit up, glowing like a jewel in the heart of the streets. People poured in, dressed in fine clothes, eager not only to hear music, but also to witness whether the mystery woman would appear. Whispers filled the lobby. Some guests leaned close to each other, saying they had heard she might be there. Others shook their heads, convinced she would never show. The mystery only made the night more exciting. Ushers moved quickly to guide people to their seats, but the buzz of chatter never stopped. Backstage, the famous pianist paced slowly. His mind was on the music, but his heart was restless. He had performed countless shows, yet this one felt different. Tonight he had left the door open, both literally and symbolically. If she walked in, he was ready. If she didn't, the world would continue to wonder. Meanwhile, across town, the woman sat in her small apartment. Her coat was draped over the chair, her shoes near the door. For hours she had debated whether to leave. Her mind was torn. She feared being exposed, being pushed into a spotlight she never wanted. But her soul longed for the piano, longed for the stage. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman uncertain yet alive. She closed her eyes and remembered the sound of the hall last time. The silence when she began, the roar of applause when she finished. That memory gave her courage. Slowly, she picked up her coat and stepped outside. The cool night air greeted her, and she walked toward the hall with steady steps. Inside, the concert began. The pianist played the first pieces with skill and power. The audience clapped, but beneath the applause was a shared curiosity. Each time the lights dimmed, heads turned. Toward the entrance, waiting, hoping, the woman arrived quietly, slipping into the hall as unnoticed as possible. She found a seat near the back. Blending in with the crowd, her heart raced. She told herself she was only there to listen, not to play. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she believed her own promise. Halfway through the night, the pianist finished a stirring piece and stood. He addressed the audience warmly, thanking them for their generosity toward the charity. Then, with a pause, he mentioned the unforgettable moment from his last concert. His words sent a ripple through the hall. People leaned forward, eyes wide. He spoke of the mystery woman with admiration, calling her performance a gift. Then he extended his invitation once more. If she was present, the stage was open to her. The hall went silent, the lights swept gently across the crowd, searching. People craned their necks, scanning the seats. For a long moment, no one moved. The woman's chest tightened. She clutched, her hands together. She could feel hundreds of invisible eyes waiting. Finally, as if guided by something greater than fear, she rose from her seat. Gasps spread through the hall. Heads turned. Whispers grew into shouts of recognition. She walked, slowly toward the stage, her steps light but firm. The pianist's face lit up, his eyes wide with both surprise and joy. The audience erupted in applause before she even touched the piano. The sound was deafening, but to her, it felt distant. Her focus was on the instrument. Waiting under the spotlight, she reached the stage, greeted by the pianist with a gentle bow. He gestured toward the bench as if presenting her with a throne. She sat down, her hands hovering above the keys. The hall grew quiet. Once again, the world seemed to hold its breath. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The first notes drifted into the silence like drops of water into still air. Gentle, soft, but clear. The melody unfolded slowly, building in layers. Each note carried emotion, not forced but natural, as though her heart had found its voice. The audience leaned closer, their eyes fixed, their ears hungry for every sound. The pianist stood nearby, his arms crossed but his expression soft. He listened with respect. His earlier hope was confirmed. This was not chance. This was real talent, real soul. The music swelled, filling every corner of the hall. It was more than performance, it was confession, it was truth. As she played, the woman forgot about fear, forgot about the crowd. She became part of the piano, part of the music. Her fingers flew across the keys with confidence she had once lost but now reclaimed. The melody rose to a powerful climax, then drifted gently down like a bird returning to its nest. When the final note lingered in the air, silence returned, a heavy silence thick with awe. Then the hall exploded into thunderous applause, louder than ever before. People leapt to their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting. Some even wiped away tears. The pianist stepped forward, clapping as hard as anyone. He placed a hand on her shoulder and leaned close. Though his words were soft, the audience could feel the respect in his gesture. She stood slowly, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shining. The applause seemed endless, wave after wave crashing around her. She bowed gently, her heart full. For the first time, she accepted the moment. She was no longer just the ordinary woman who had been pulled on stage as a joke. She was a musician, and tonight, the world had seen her. As she returned to her seat, people reached out to touch her hand, to whisper congratulations. The pianist finished the concert with brilliance, but even he knew that the highlight of the evening belonged not to him, but to her. That night, as she walked home under the city lights, she felt a quiet strength inside her. The mystery was no longer a secret. The world now knew her music, and though she still feared what might come, she carried a spark of hope that could not be put out. The morning after the charity concert, the city was alive with chatter, newspapers printed bold headlines about the mysterious woman who had once again shocked the world. Photos from the evening showed her at the piano, her face glowing under the stage lights. Her name was still unknown, but her image had begun to spread everywhere. Radio shows replayed the story. Television anchors spoke with excitement. Social pages filled with clips recorded by people in the audience. Some short videos went viral, capturing the moment she began to play and the way the crowd erupted into cheers. In every corner of the city, people asked the same question: who is she? The woman sat in her apartment, sipping tea as she listened to the news in disbelief. She had tried to keep her life private, but now it felt impossible. She saw her own picture on a news website and quickly closed the screen. Her heart raced. Fear and pride mixed inside her like two opposing waves. She wanted to hide. Yet part of her was glad the world had finally heard her music. At her workplace, whispers followed her. A few co-workers stared a little too long. One finally gathered the courage to ask if she was the woman from the concert. She smiled faintly and shook her head, but the doubt in their eyes remained. She knew the truth was slipping closer to the surface. Soon she would no longer be able to deny it. Across the city, The famous pianist sat with reporters. He spoke with warmth and admiration. He described her as a rare talent and confessed that her performance had humbled him. When asked if he knew who she was, he shook his head, saying only that he hoped she would step forward willingly. His respect for her was clear, and his words carried weight. Offers began to arrive at the concert hall. Talent scouts, music producers, and even schools reached out, asking for contact with the mystery woman. Some wanted to give her a platform, others wanted to market her story, but no one knew where to find her. She was like a shadow, real but unreachable. The woman felt the weight of it all. In the quiet of her home, she sat at her piano each night, playing softly. Her music calmed her, reminded her of who she was beneath the noise of the world. She thought back to her younger years when the piano had been her dream. She remembered the hours of practice, the small recitals, the encouragement she once received. She had loved music deeply, but life's hardships had forced her to leave it behind. Now the dream was knocking again, louder than ever. She asked herself if she had the courage to open the door. One evening, she went for a walk in the park to clear her mind. The city lights twinkled in the distance. Children laughed near the playground. Musicians strummed guitars on the benches. Music was everywhere, reminding her that it had never left her life. A passerby stopped her, recognizing her from the concert. The stranger thanked her for her performance, saying it had inspired them. The woman's eyes softened. For the first time, she realized that her music was not just for herself. It was a gift she could share. Meanwhile, the famous pianist was more determined than ever. He began planning another concert, this time with a twist. He announced it would feature not just him, but also a special guest if she accepts. The city buzzed with excitement. Was this a hint that he had found her, or simply a hopeful invitation? The anticipation grew. The woman heard about it almost immediately. Flyers appeared around town. Her neighbors whispered about it. At first she felt trapped, but then she realized something. She had a choice. She could continue hiding, or she could step forward and embrace the gift she had been given. She sat at her piano that night, her fingers gliding over the keys. Her music was soft but full of emotion. She imagined herself on stage again, not pulled up as a joke, but standing there by her own choice. For the first time, she considered what it would mean to step fully into the light. The following days were filled with inner conflict. She feared the loss of her quiet life. She feared being judged or misunderstood, but she also remembered the faces in the audience, the way her music had touched them. She thought about the stranger in the park who had thanked her. Perhaps her music could mean more than she had ever imagined. The famous pianist in interviews repeated his admiration. He never pushed or pressured, but his respect was clear. He spoke as if he believed she had something the world needed. His words echoed in her mind. She had once been invisible, but now someone believed in her, truly believed. On the night before the next concert, she sat awake, staring at the piano in her small apartment. Her reflection in the polished wood showed a woman caught between fear and courage. She whispered softly to herself, promising that she would not let fear control her forever. She placed her hands on the keys and played until the sun began to rise. Her music carried the sound of decision, of a heart slowly opening to the world. Though she had not yet spoken her choice aloud, deep inside, she knew that she was ready to take the next step. The woman could not sleep. Night after night she found herself awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. The world around her had changed so quickly, but her mind was caught between yesterday and years long gone. Music had returned to her life, but with it came memories she had locked away. She remembered the first time she touched a piano as a child. The keys were old and slightly yellow, but to her they looked like treasure. She had pressed one key, then another, and the sound made her smile. Her parents noticed her fascination and managed to arrange lessons with a local teacher. It was not easy, money was tight, but they believed in her talent. As a young girl, she would practice for hours. Her small hands stumbled at first, but with time they grew stronger. The piano became her best friend. She played when she was happy. She played when she was sad. The music always listened, always gave her comfort. In her teenage years, she entered small competitions. Her teachers praised her dedication. Some said she had the kind of talent that could take her far. She dreamed of concert halls, of grand stages, of a life where her music could reach people everywhere. Her future seemed bright, but life, as it often does, had other plans. A family illness forced her to step away from lessons. Bills piled up. Responsibilities grew heavier. She took part-time jobs to help, promising herself she would return to music later. Later never came. The years slipped by and her dreams slipped further away. She still kept her piano, though, an old upright that carried the sound of her past. At night, when the world was quiet, she would sit and play softly, not for applause, not for recognition, but for herself. Yet each note carried a hint of longing, a reminder of the path she had once imagined. Now, sitting in her apartment years later, she felt the weight of those memories. She wondered what her life might have been if she had never stopped. Would she have become a professional, known across the world? Or would she have faded away in the crowd of countless musicians? She would never know. But what she did know was this: music had never truly left her. It had waited patiently, like a loyal friend, until the day she found herself on that stage by accident across the city. The famous pianist spoke again in an interview. This time his words were gentler. He told the reporters that he did not want to force the woman into fame. He simply wanted her to know that her music had touched lives, including his own. His respect was clear. His humility only made the public more fascinated. The woman heard his words on the radio one evening. She sat by her piano, listening quietly. For the first time, she smiled while hearing people talk about her. She realized that he was not trying to steal her story or claim her gift. He was only trying to encourage her, to let her know she mattered. That night, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to imagine. What if she returned to the stage, not as a joke, not as a surprise, but as herself? What if she shared her music openly, without fear? The thought scared her, but it also thrilled her. For years, she had hidden behind the walls of an ordinary life. Maybe it was time to step beyond them. The following days were filled with small signs. A coworker left a note on her desk saying, "Your playing inspired me to pick up my guitar again." A neighbor thanked her for the soft tunes they sometimes heard drifting through the walls. Even strangers online posted words of gratitude to the unknown pianist who had reminded them of the beauty of music. Each message planted courage in her heart. She spent more time at her piano, playing pieces she hadn't touched in years. Her fingers stumbled sometimes, but the music always came back, stronger with each attempt. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in decades. The famous pianist continued to prepare for his upcoming concert. He left the invitation open once more, making it clear that the seat beside him on stage would always be waiting. The city buzzed with speculation. Would she appear again? Would this be the moment when her identity was finally revealed? The woman sat in her apartment one night, staring at her reflection in the piano's polished surface. She whispered softly, not to anyone else but to herself, "Maybe it's time." Her voice trembled, but there was strength in it too. Her journey had been long, filled with detours and sacrifices, but life had given her another chance. This time she was older, wiser, and perhaps braver. She had nothing to prove, yet everything to give. The stage was waiting. The audience was waiting. The pianist was waiting. But most importantly, the music inside her was waiting. And deep in her heart, she knew she could not keep it silent much longer. The night of the grand concert arrived. The city lights sparkled as if they too were waiting for something special. The hall was filled beyond capacity, every seat taken, every corner buzzing with whispers. People spoke not only about the famous pianist, but also about the possibility that the mystery woman might appear again. Backstage, the pianist adjusted his suit and took a deep breath. He had performed in front of kings and queens, but tonight his heart felt different. It was not just another show. It was a chance to witness something greater than himself. He hoped she would come, but he also knew the decision was hers alone. Across town, the woman stood in front of her mirror. Her dress was simple, her hair neatly tied, She looked at her reflection and felt a rush of nerves. Her hands shook slightly, but there was also a quiet strength in her eyes. She whispered to herself, reminding her heart that she was ready. The journey from her small apartment to the grand hall felt like walking through a dream. The streets glowed with lamplight. People hurried past, unaware of the storm in her chest. As she approached the building, she saw crowds gathering outside. She slipped in quietly, unnoticed at first. Her coat pulled close around her. Inside, the concert began. The pianist played with his usual brilliance, the audience applauding each piece. But beneath the music there was a shared anticipation. Every time the lights shifted, heads turned, searching the rows. The question hung in the air, would she come? Halfway through the night, the pianist paused. He stood, his hand resting lightly on the piano. His voice carried across the hall as he spoke of music not as performance, but as connection. He reminded the audience of the moment when a simple joke had turned into something extraordinary. He said the stage was open again should the mysterious woman wish to share her gift. The hall went silent. The light swept across the audience, the air grew heavy with hope. Then slowly she rose from her seat near the back. A collective gasp echoed, followed by applause that grew louder with each step she took toward the stage. The pianist's eyes lit up as he extended his hand to her. She accepted it and climbed onto the stage. The applause was thunderous, but she kept her gaze calm. Her steps were steady. She reached the piano and sat down. The crowd hushed instantly, waiting. Her fingers hovered above the keys. For a brief moment she closed her eyes, breathing deeply. This time she was not here by accident. She was not here as part of a joke. She was here because she had chosen it. That thought filled her with courage. The first notes flowed gently like water slipping over stones. The melody was soft, fragile, but filled with honesty. The hall seemed to lean closer, every ear listening, every heart opening. Her music grew, rising with strength and grace, filling the air with both power and tenderness. People in the audience felt tears sting their eyes. Some held their breath, afraid to miss a single sound. The pianist stood quietly beside her, his face filled with admiration. He knew he was witnessing something rare, not just music, but truth. Her performance carried the weight of her years, the lost dreams, the sacrifices, the quiet nights when she had played only for herself. Now every note told that story. Every chord carried her heart. When she reached the final passage, her fingers flew across the keys, strong and confident. Then, with one last lingering note, she ended. Silence fell, deep and powerful. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Then the hall erupted, louder than ever before. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, cheering. Some cried openly. Others waved their hands in awe. The sound of the ovation thundered like a storm. The woman stood slowly, her chest rising. With heavy breaths, she bowed gently, tears glistening in her eyes. This time she did not shrink away. She accepted the moment fully. She was no longer the hidden woman in the crowd. She was a pianist, and the world had seen her. The famous pianist stepped forward and bowed to her, a gesture of pure respect. Then he turned to the audience and lifted her hand. The applause doubled. The hall shook with admiration. For once, even the master knew the night belonged to someone else. When the concert ended, reporters rushed to the lobby. People begged for interviews, for her name, for her story. She smiled kindly, answering few words, but her quiet grace only made her more beloved. The world finally knew her, not as a mystery, but as a voice of music itself. That night, as she walked home under the stars, she felt peace. The weight of years had lifted. She had carried her gift back into the light, not for fame, not for glory, but because music was who she truly was. And as she reached her small apartment, she whispered softly, with a smile, "I am home."